from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, folks, welcome back. Tech Corner is back after a break over Veteran November. For the month of December, we are back and with Tech Corner this month. I'm really excited. I've got a very, very special guest for the program today. But before we get started on today's program, make sure you do subscribe to our podcast right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, turn on the notification bell right here below, and you'll be able to get notified every time we post a new podcast. We post 6 total podcasts a week. 4 practitioner briefs at Tech Corner and our CISO Talk podcast. So make sure you subscribe. You can find all of our content on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. Joining me for today's episode, Anna Collard. She is the SVP Content Strategy and Evangelist at Know Before Africa. Know Before, a big supporter of the show, folks. So I'm really excited to have Anna on. And she's from Africa, which is even greater because she's my first guest on the program from the continent of Africa. So Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, James. It's a real honor.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I know you and I were chatting a little bit before we got started, and I'm very excited about today's episode because we're really going to address some of the challenges that we take for granted here, I think, and I don't want to say more developed nations, but yeah, more developed nations, right? The U.S., first world country. I mean, South Africa has a first world part of South Africa, like Joburg, Sandton, those areas, Cape Town. But then everything in the middle is third world kind of, and even worse, some of it is Stone Age, where they don't have running water and electricity, and there's parts of South Africa that, you know, are extremely challenging, and that creates kind of a huge tech deficit, which creates a lot of opportunities for cyber criminals. Let's talk a little bit about the use of tech in Africa. What's that like, and how does that differ, let's say, for example, from Europe or the US or other developed nations?
I think that you already alluded to it quite well, is that we have a mixture of first and third world combined. And I mean, a lot of people in the more developed countries, they also look at Africa as one place, and it's very diverse. So depending on where you go, even within the same country, like South Africa, for example, you may have cities or business centers that are very much well developed. In fact, some of those businesses may have been, in comparison to, you know, some of the organizations that I've come across in Europe or even in the States, they're actually quite sort of proactive and mature. But then again, you have the rural areas, or even within the cities, more poor, I would call townships, poorer areas that lack the most basic infrastructure. And if you sort of average it out across the continent, we have 40% of the population that has no access to internet, for example, or electricity even. And that brings with it a whole host of challenges look at the whole pandemic and people having to work from home or schooling from home. Well, if I don't even have access to electricity, how do I even get access to the internet? So those are very specific challenges that unfortunately a vast component of the population is facing. And also that explains why a lot of governments are not prioritizing cybersecurity to the level that they possibly should, because they have bigger problems to fry. You know, there's poverty, there's basic infrastructure that's lacking, access to clean water, for example. So cybersecurity is at the bottom of the list in a lot of those challenges, and something that we're trying hard to change, because it is a massive risk for the continent.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, people talk about Africa and don't realize just how big and diverse the continent is, right? And to give some of our listeners just a geography lesson, right? Western Africa was predominantly French colonies. Northern Africa and Western Africa, so places like Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Côte d'Ivoire, all those places were all French colonies, predominantly that part of of Africa. People there speak French, and then their local kind of dialect. In Morocco, they have an Arabic French kind of accent. They call it Maghreb. It's actually really fascinating. I learned to understand it because it plays off of, as someone who speaks both French and Arabic, it plays off of both languages, which is magnificent. And it's kind of like Afrikaans, which plays off of English and Dutch in South Africa. And the western part of Africa and the eastern part of Africa, which everything seaside, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, and so forth, that are all were predominantly either Southeast Asian colonies or whatnot, where we saw a lot of different people, kind of whether it be Arabs or Indians, that have kind of ruled those places. And then you've got South Africa and the southern part of Africa, Namibia, South Africa, and so forth, that are very affluent. People forget how affluent, like Namibia and Botswana and some of those places are within the continent of Africa, but are also reliant on the development of nations around them. And then Central Africa, which is just a desert. It's very poor. It lacks natural resources and so forth. And Africa's kind of the continent that's currently, has been a focus of the Chinese for quite some time from a geopolitical perspective. They've been handing out loans and technology at almost almost like how the banks in America were handing out mortgages pre the subprime mortgage crisis. So Africa's facing a lot of challenges technologically and geopolitically that all impact some of its cyber strategy. Talk a little bit about the use of tech, because you brought up something which is, kind of 40% of people barely have access to internet and electricity, but a lot of people have smartphones. I mean, the difference between kind of tech adoption in the Western, more developed nations was we kind of went desktop, laptop, smartphones, tablets, etc. But people in Africa skipped the desktop version. Many of them skipped the laptop if they weren't affluent, if they didn't study in a major university. They kind of went directly into the smartphone realm.
Yes, I mean, look, at the moment, what is also quite interesting from a technology point of view is they're actually not on smartphones. I mean, there is a massive trend towards smartphone adoption, but there's still a lot of people that are using feature phones. And in terms of the tech stack that they're using, is that, and what banks, for example, use for mobile banking, is a 20-year-old technology called USSD. And that's been used heavily in authentication and mobile banking, like I said. And it's key to a lot of the sort of mobile financial transactions. And but what is interesting is if you look at the moment, we have about 500 million of people that are connected to the internet in some way or form, predominantly via mobile devices. And that number is going to double in the next 2 years. So we have another 500 million people coming online, and most of them will be using smartphones or mobile devices. But again, because affordability is such an issue, you'll see that the adoption of secondhand smartphones, old smartphones, Chinese phones that are pre-installed with all sorts of things, that is a challenge that the telcos and the financial institutions are faced with, because you're dealing with, on the one hand side, I suppose it could also be an opportunity that people coming online without having undergone through the desktop and sort of computer-based evolution, and possibly, and this is something that we were discussing just the other day, is possibly they've never learned some of the bad habits that we may have learned in Europe or in the States. Like some of the users, they're growing up in the 80s, 90s, they never used passwords, right? Because that wasn't a thing then. And that's why passwords is such a, I mean, if we talk about security awareness, passwords is such an old hat, but it's still one of the number one issues. And maybe by having this massive greenfield and sort of fresh generation that gets hooked onto the internet with their mobile devices, there could be an opportunity, if we do the education correctly, that we teach them the right habits from the get-go. But the reality is that I think that we are looking at a massive risk here in terms of, well, you have these first-time users, many of which, by the way, are not English speaking, as you mentioned. They may be in the Francophone Africa, or sort of, in other areas where English isn't their first language. And a lot of the tech security material out there is just available in English. So we have these first-time users who are non-English native speaking. They haven't been exposed to any form of, I don't know, like security awareness or computer-based training before. And now they're given these devices that give them access to their financial transactions, mobile banking. I mean, what's also very interesting is, I think a lot of people in the West don't realize, is that in terms of mobile adoption, and specifically around mobile payments, the Southern African Hemisphere is that region with the most, not just percentage-wise, but actual numbers, with the most financial transaction being conducted on mobile devices in the world. That's more than in Asia. And that, in itself provides a sort of attractive target market for cyber criminals who know that, hey, there's a huge adoption and digitization in general. These guys are all using their phones to do mobile payments. Some of them are doing the stuff on very old devices that you can't even patch or update because they're like second-hand or third-hand devices. A lot of them are still feature phones, so using USSD technology. Not that that is insecure in itself, but it is a challenge to sort of protect these devices, and combined with the social engineering component and the fact that people do also share these devices amongst others, there is a massive risk. I mean, we talk about it being a bit of a ticking time bomb. If you were a criminal into Africa, you open a business for second-hand smartphones, you preload your malware on it, and there you go. Just wait until they do their first transaction and siphon it off somehow. Not that I want to give anyone any ideas.
I don't think you're going to give anyone any ideas that they haven't had already. I think in the last week or so, we've seen numerous ransomware attacks that have just been extremely weird with the way these attackers now treat the victim of their crime. But what you brought up some very interesting points. And the human element of it here is some of these guys who may have not had the computer laptop adoption may not come in with bad habits. So I kind of want to take you back to that. What bad habits do you think we've adopted from, the computer era of the traditional kind of using a desktop DOS system to where we are today, that people who go directly, let's say, into an iPhone or an Android won't have? What do you mean by they may not have some of those bad habits?
So I mentioned the passwords, right? So if you grew up back then, unfortunately I'm showing my age, but that wasn't a thing. And there maybe it is subconsciously, I mean, I don't know, this is not really fact-based, but there could be a thing that people just grew up with that not being a thing back in the day, and that they still have some residual resistance to using passwords. The other thing is that sort of ingrained arrogance that some of us may have to say, I don't fall for this stuff. Like, I'm too clever for phishing or social engineering attacks. Like, that's just, only idiots would fall for that. That kind of attitude, which is totally the wrong attitude, but we do come across it. And unfortunately, particularly amongst people working in IT, by the way. And I think that there could be an opportunity to, when these people come online for the first time, it is a massive risk on the one hand side because they don't understand a lot of the threats, but at the same time, if we do it correctly, and this is something I'm hoping to advocate between the telcos and the financial services industry and the governments, is that if we can all work together as an industry, and as you roll out a mobile phone contract or something, that it comes with some sort of basic education and awareness. Also, if the security features are enabled by default, like you have to put your passcode on the phone, for instance, that also hopefully will help towards some form of better behavior. Yeah, I think that's
So very good points. I kind of, we talk about passwords often and a lot. I think the other aspect of it is, and something maybe we don't account for, is people when they get a smartphone today or they get a phone to use, they're not reading the manual book. They're probably going to YouTube and they're watching a YouTube video, which means that they're likely to kind of understand and get a bit more education on the devices and how to use them from, an amateur YouTuber who's given a tutorial on a device, who might share a few things about cyber and security of the phone, and especially when it comes to online banking, than, let's say, a manual that comes with the phone is.
yeah.
So there's that aspect of that. Now, you talk about secondhand tech, kind of preloaded phones. One of the very interesting things I think we saw in the documentary Social Dilemma was the idea that all of these second generation phones that come in when you go to buy it, your first apps are downloaded by the person who sells you the phone. Right? We saw in India that one of the guys said, like, we download Facebook right away for the people who get the phone, and we open an account for them on Facebook because that's where they get their news. That's where they get all their information. That's kind of like, it's not, they don't download Chrome or Microsoft Edge or a browser that gives them the ability to kind of go into the web. They're really kind of downloading a social media platform for that. Do you see that being a challenge in tech adoption in Africa as time goes by? Kind of the idea of getting everyone kind of in one route for information or one platform to rely on?
Oh yeah, I mean, and this is not just, this is Facebook's strategy for not just Africa. I mean, you mentioned India. I think they do it in other areas of the world as well, where they actually offer free access to Facebook and thereby grow their participation rate. And I'm not going to, it's not that I want to diss Facebook, but you also referred to the social dilemma, and this is something that I strongly feel should be part of cybersecurity awareness, is that whole understanding that what you're being served on the internet is predominantly misinformation or false information, and how to critically question that and not look at social media as your newsfeed, even though people do that. But that's part of the education, again, that we need to do more about educating the public, that they don't fall in that trap and use their Facebook feed as the truth and their news updates, which is, I know they do it, but it's actually funny. I spoke to my husband just the other day, and he did say, what we should be doing is going to the schools and teaching people how to critically think again and really sort of question everything that you get served, including the proper news outlets. But it's specifically bad on social media. By the way, when he's in the wine industry, so he's not really in tech, but we watched the Social Dilemma together, and the first thing he did was cancel his Facebook account.
Yeah, I think that's been many people's instinctive reaction, is to cancel their Facebook account or their Twitter account, or use YouTube less and so forth. But in developing nations, those tools become critical, and they bring about a whole new level of security challenges, right? I mean, people running their lives through Facebook. To me, one of the threat vectors I see is I develop an app on Facebook, which is absolutely free, that is similar to your banking app, where I can harvest credentials, where I can harvest passwords, where I can get your PII, I can get you to share your date of birth, your secret questions. That allows me, on the other hand, to really establish and build your identity for whatever purpose I want to use it for in the future. And I think that's the scary part of Facebook, not the whole idea of all the information that comes there, but just the amount of tools that one can generate through Facebook to launch an attack and really take over someone's identity are immeasurable.
I think there's so many dangers to it. That's one of it. I mean, the feeding into the whole polarization and misinformation, disinformation we mentioned earlier, and that I do feel that is a massive risk as well. I mean, I'm busy reading a book called Manipulated. I tried to I forgot the author's name, but it's a lady who worked in the American government, and it's a bit conspiracy theory based, but it's frightening about what is being done sort of proactively by Russia, China, etc., to try to destabilize the West and our values through these consciously polarizing articles or updates that just feed a separation. And it doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you believe in something else what the other party believes, that we destabilize the society. So it is scary when we look at it from that point of view. But then the third element, and this is something that extends beyond the digital realm, is especially, it's a huge problem in South Africa specifically. South Africa is sort of a hub of human trafficking, unfortunately. And look, I mean, I had a talk the other day with a lady who specializes in personal safety. So that's your actual physical safety. What do you do if there's an intruder in your home? How do you speak to your children to protect them and identify a predator? And because of the grooming that's happening online, the predators are using social media, predominantly social media, by the way. 85% of the grooming is happening on social media chats or sort of those channels, and then obviously once there's in real life meeting, and there can abduction can happen, and sort of the whole human trafficking route takes place. So there is like a convergence between the physical security and the threats we have in terms of our children possibly falling into the slavery trade and what's happening online. So it's like, I find it quite interesting. I have 2 children. I'm a mom myself, and just talking to her, I realized, oh my God, I've been in cybersecurity for 20 years, but I did not realize how much I still have to learn in terms of teaching my kids how to, detect a predator online as well as on the playground, and what to do if they do get accosted in some way, and how to behave, and which is actually interesting. You can only do that through role playing. You shouldn't give them facts. You just should play out different scenarios, and then practice with them how to react, a bit like we do simulation techniques, in companies. So that's the third angle in terms of social media that I'm worried about.
So the book you referenced earlier, for those who are wondering, it's by Teresa Payton.
That's it. Yeah.
Manipulated by Teresa Payton, a very good book, came out of April of this year. Speaks to some of the stuff we're going through right now, by the way, folks. She's done a pretty good job of really honing in on that. I actually read the book a while ago when it first came out, and I thought it was very good. I wouldn't say it's conspiracy theory based. I'd probably say it brings up scenarios and a bunch of different role plays that could or could not be true. It's no different than when we do a tabletop exercise and we simulate an attack. There's parts of that.
No, I mean, I think what I found fascinating is that when you speak to people, again, I'm using my husband as a reference because he's the world's biggest skeptic, but if I explain to him that, let's say, Russia wants to destabilize the US and is meddling in the elections, etc., his first reaction is sort of, that's just misinformation, and then, in the book, like, she did reference, which I thought was really interesting, how they could, it had nothing to do with the elections. It was more to do with the Black Lives Matter movement,
right.
I believe, and they had posts sort of riling up the Black Lives Matter movement side, and then at the same time posts riling up the white supremacist people. Don't want to use a bad word, but then they were able and unfortunately, I think it actually culminated in those 2 groups meeting each other in real life and causing real protests and
Right.
possibly even injuries. And when they did the incident analysis, they could trace the IP address back to the same IP address of both these posts coming from some Russian source, and then you wonder, I mean, the guy or the group trying to create this unrest didn't care either about blacks or whites or whatever. They just want to create unrest and destabilization.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the challenge, I think, for Africa as time goes along, is the idea of dealing with it. It's going to be interesting because, the tech leaders in places like the continent of Africa are going to see what's happening across the world, and they may devise their own way of blocking it before it gets bad. I think in the U.S. and in the Western world, it's gotten to a point where there's a lot of distrust in government. There's a lot of distrust in organizations. There's just a general lack of trust currently. But maybe in Africa we might see kind of the hope of regaining that trust by some of the stuff African entrepreneurs and thinkers and innovators do when it comes to adopting new technology to a population that hasn't been exposed to it.
Yeah, I hope so. And in fact, I mean, just last week I went to a conference, and it was my first live conference this year, by the way, so I felt it was quite a bit odd, normal yoga pants. Had to dress properly. And it was called Africa Arena, and it brought African entrepreneurs and sort of startups and investors as well as the government together, and it was a really good conference. And my talk about or addressing the entrepreneurs was all about, go into cybersecurity. We have a real opportunity here. We don't have enough people on the continent. We have real challenges that are African specific challenges, and we need African solutions. And join the group. We only have, apparently, I mean, it's a bit old now, it's a 2017 number, but we only have 10,000 security professionals on the whole continent. That's
I think that's
really
different though now, right? I mean, isn't that kind of broken down by region? I mean, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco are a little bit more advanced, and they probably have 90% of those security professionals, if not 95% of those security professionals.
Probably, but it's not enough. I think Oracle has that many security pros just working for them. And if you look at Africa, we have 54, 53, depending which countries you include or not, countries. That's a really, really low number.
Yeah, that's 200 people a country, just about, which is never enough, right? We do have a shortage. We see that. Kind of. Let's talk a little bit about that, though. Kind of that challenge, because one of the tech adoptions, one of the very interesting things is, I've traveled, and you and I spoke about this previously. Here in the States, kind of, as security professionals, we use Discord and Slack and Teams and so forth. But in Africa, like parts of the Middle East, like parts of other parts of the world, WhatsApp is essentially the main form of communication. WhatsApp groups are how, people don't send emails. They send each other a WhatsApp message. That's right. Email is seldomly used. So let's talk a little, because that brings up the whole idea of cyber challenges in Africa, right? The problems that need to be solved in Africa that are unique to Africa is the fact that most people don't have laptops and computers. So the idea of having Slack or Discord or Teams or Skype or anything like that aren't very popular. But WhatsApp, which is a free messaging app, allows you to talk, do video messages, do video calls, absolutely free, just by paying for your phone subscription. And people use it for business, and they use their own personal devices to do business on them, which creates kind of a whole new set of challenges. Wow. Like, I've got to tell you, since we spoke about this, I've been like sitting in my head going, how do you get this under, how do you wrap your head around that? Because what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I think we did a survey just the report was just published 2-3 weeks ago called in fact, it may not even. No, it's already live. I'll send the link to you for people who are interested. It's about the state of cybersecurity awareness in 8 African countries, and we surveyed the people on the streets, so the actual consumers, and it was limited to people that are employed or in the professional life. So it excludes students and pensioners, etc. And I tell you that we asked them, one of the questions was, what are you using to communicate for business? And then what are you using to communicate in your personal life? And email was still high up there for business, but WhatsApp was right behind it. I mean, it was like a 1 or 2% difference in the 80% kind of value. And then in their personal lives, it's literally 95% is the average that people use WhatsApp to communicate on. In Kenya, it's 99%. It's literally, I mean, in Kenya, you cannot get hold of people by email. You have to use WhatsApp. So yeah, in terms of addressing that, again, I think there is an opportunity. Like a lot of businesses are using WhatsApp for business. You can, I mean, even the retailers, the banks, you have like these WhatsApp bots that you can communicate with. You can use WhatsApp to use even as, I mean, I built a whole solution, a prototype where we could do cybersecurity awareness via WhatsApp, because you just distribute your video and then you have like a little quiz engine where you can ask people to, answer questions. So there's also an opportunity to use it as a tool to, distribute information and make it quite short and relevant and easy to consume. In terms of people using their private or personal devices for work, I think that it's probably not just an African challenge with COVID. It's sort of everybody has that problem, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like, as a business, you have to build your applications or your solutions in a way that it really doesn't matter how the end user gets to it, whether it's their personal device, corporate provision device, whatever it is. You have to build the security within the app itself or the authentication layer, and you can't control the endpoint.
Yeah, you pretty much have almost zero control,
and zero trust.
Not only zero trust, I mean, I think zero trust is a buzzword. I did a survey on LinkedIn about zero trust.
It is people, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to use a buzzword.
No, it's okay. It's actually, I'll tell you something. Zero trust is about as divisive of a word in cyber as politics are in America today. Meaning it's a 50-50 split, almost down the middle. I mean, in my survey, it was like 49-51. So 51% thought it was a buzzword and just a sham, and 49% saw it as a real cybersecurity policy and something that they love. And it was very interesting to kind of see that, because I've always looked at zero trust and I felt like it goes against the principles of doing business. Right? The principles of doing business is trust and having good, goodwill and good intentions in that relationship. And so kind of using a motto, and I think maybe if they changed the term zero trust, it might be more applicable. I think it turns a lot of people off, because if you go and you try to sell something that says zero trust to someone, it creates it's a double negative. Yeah, it's a negative, right? Psychologically speaking, it's a negative. We use zero trust, so sorry, but we don't trust you, and we're gonna have to verify you every single time. And you're like, but you know me, it's me, same guy I've always been, until one day it's not you, and try to explain that. There's an aspect to it. I think it's very interesting to look at. I know in Israel, for example, everything is done on WhatsApp. Right? Like, yeah, there's Slack and there's Discord, and Israel's, very technologically advanced nation. but everything there is on WhatsApp. And to me, that's fascinating. I remember being in the UAE and Saudi and all those places. We did everything on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
You know, very little was done on email. I would get RFPs in WhatsApp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No, I mean, it's a challenge for, I mean, you know, I had my own company called Popcorn Training, and then KnowBe4 acquired us, and now we obviously part of the KnowBe4 operations and have to comply to the KnowBe4 policies. And one of their policies is to only use the corporate sort of approved communication channels, and we use something called well, it doesn't matter what it's called, but it's like a voice over IP telephone thing. And our salespeople, they cannot get through customers using this app because people don't recognize the number and it's not on WhatsApp. So we actually had to motivate to get an exception in our policy to be allowed to use WhatsApp to contact our customers, because that's the only way we can get hold of them and communicate with them.
yeah,
So
it's again, the challenges we face in the adoption of technology and the long-term security is going to be extremely interesting. I think specifically for businesses that look to expand to Africa that aren't used to WhatsApp being kind of the main form of communication.
yeah.
Right? Like that's where I think the challenge is going to be, is if you're a business and you're looking to go and do business in Africa, understand that someone sending you a proposal through WhatsApp is completely and absolutely acceptable.
Yes, it is.
Someone asking you or sending you something that is highly confidential through WhatsApp is completely acceptable. And I think that's a challenge that most Western businesses aren't used to it. I mean, I got to tell you, we've done RFPs through WhatsApp. Like it's crazy, but it's absolutely true. Let's talk a little bit about the diversity challenges that exist within cyber, specifically within Africa, right? So people would think that Africa would not have a diversity issue, but it does have some diversity challenges in terms of, workforce development and kind of entrepreneurship. Talk a little bit about some of the stuff you're doing to increase participation in cyber for a more diverse crowd.
So if we start with the gender, let's start with the gender story, because obviously I'm a woman, and I'm quite passionate about that. And unfortunately, currently Africa has, I think it's about 9% of the cybersecurity professionals being female, and amongst the senior kind of level, it's only 1%. And I know that that's not really different to the rest of the world. I think it's only in the States that you have about 20% female representation, but if you look into Europe and other areas, it's just as bad. So something that we'd like to uncover or change, at least, or change the narrative, is to attract more young women and girls into possibly pursuing cybersecurity as a career path. And I teamed up with a bunch of other really amazing ladies. The one is from Kenya, and her name's April, and she's part of the African Cyber Defense Forum, and we founded something called the Cyber Herons. And we did a survey. It was very much like, unofficial, through social media, by the way. So just sort of a Google form on social media, and it went, we shared it with the people that we know, and we got about 450 responses back from teachers all over Africa. And we asked them a couple of questions, and obviously with the goal to identify, okay, what can we do to attract more girls into the industry? And we also asked other questions, like, for example, at how many schools do you currently cover cybersecurity, either as a subject or as part of a different course? And only 3.7%, James, currently touch on cybersecurity as a subject in the schools that we surveyed. And it's shocking, because even disregarding the whole attracting more girls, just like if we think about being cybersecurity aware as a life skill rather than a tech skill, nowadays you have to think of it like that because everything is digital. Then not enough is being done to sort of educate the youth and prepare them for that digital world. The other thing that was interesting is obviously we asked them, like, how can we bring messages across? And again, the whole lack of electricity and internet access is an issue. So 30% of the teachers that we surveyed said that no, their pupils or student or learners don't have internet access at home. So they can possibly get it in school, but not at home. So the other thing that we asked them a whole lot of questions in terms of what type of initiatives could we do, but the number one initiative that they all sort of the majority of the participants positively responded to was to share positive role models. So stories of other African women that can be very much female and like sort of a woman in cybersecurity and be successful and provide like a role model to these young girls to show them that it's a possible career choice, and you can be cool and in tech, or you can be beautiful and be in cybersecurity. And I think that's something that we'd like to kick off, is to interview some of these African queens in cybersecurity and then really profile them in a nice way, and then share this content with the teachers so they can distribute it or show it in class, because we can't, obviously we'll put it online, but the girls can't access it. So we have to use the teachers to distribute the content. So that is some of the objectives that we set out to do next year. And there'll be a research report that we're busy compiling called Tomorrow's Cyber Heroines, which I'll share with you as soon as it's out. So that's from a gender base. I know diversity obviously covers more than that, and I didn't even, I mean, that's also a big issue in Africa, the whole acceptance of the LGBTQ, the whole other in between,
LGBTQ,
it's not just, there we go. So it's not just men and women. There's also, if you go to some of the security conferences in Africa, or South Africa in particularly, you do want to see not just white male men, which is sort of that's the average, let's face it, everywhere in the world. If you go to a security conference, it is very much white middle-aged men.
Well, it's what started the industry, right? I think I think there's different industries that where the statistics are a little different from cyber. I think cybersecurity as a whole has done excellent steps over the last few years to really increase the diversity in the workforce. I did a whole series in November called Veteran November. And I was speaking to veterans, U.S. military veterans who are in information security. And I had people who were African-American, Hispanic, Indian, Arab, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, atheist, women, men, you name it. Just a real diversity of people over the course of a month. And was most of my interviews predominantly white men? I'd say, but it was probably around 60%. Right, the rest of it was extremely diverse, and I think there's an aspect to that where when we talk about diversity, we need to talk about, I want to say more of the idea of how do we get more kids from different backgrounds interested in cyber. And so we don't see a diversity challenge, let's say, for example, from India. Like if you go to India, they don't have an issue with cybersecurity and diversity. Because educationally, everyone wants to go into IT, and women and men are encouraged to do that. No different than being a doctor or a scientist or an engineer or an architect. And we see something very similar in different parts of Asia. I know in Korea, I spoke at an event in Korea, and 40% of the audience was women.
That's awesome.
So I mean, I think it's I think it less has to do with opportunity and more has to do with the fact that it's got to be grassroots. And like you said, we're going to the schools, we're going to these young girls. Here in the States, we've launched a bunch of initiatives to address high school kids and middle school kids. But here we're able to do it online, right? We're able to do it through really cool YouTube videos and engagements through Snapchat and TikTok and all these different platforms that really bring kids in beyond just the idea that you can really learn cyber on your own if you invest the time to do it. Like if you just go to YouTube and you search and you listen and you take notes and you kind of try, you can learn it without having to go to a college degree or anything like that.
But that's exactly that's the beauty, right? Like all we need really is to spur the interest for it and get people excited about it and wanting to learn more about it. And then you don't have to create new content even. It's all out there. Okay, it is predominantly in English, so maybe there's a bit of an issue from a translation point of view. But the content is there. There's amazing content. So all we really need to is get them hooked in a way or interested, and then provide them with a guided curriculum depending on where they want to go to. And then, like you said, there's great online content available.
That's free. Yeah.
That's free.
That's free. Right. And all you need to do at that point is find people like myself or others who are willing to bring someone with a passion who doesn't have the certs on, because we know that passion's going to take you much further in your career path than any cert will. Right?
Yeah.
Like, with all respect to certs and universities and college degrees and whatnot, the people who were most passionate, you look at Mark Zuckerberg, he dropped out of Harvard to start Facebook because he had a passion for something. He was onto something. Same thing with Steve Jobs or Bill Gates and so many others. When you have a passion and you have a drive for something and you're smart enough, you don't really need that certificate on the wall to get there. But let that be the difference between entrepreneurship and getting a job. Those guys all became entrepreneurs. They started a company and went to solve a bigger problem. If you're looking to start a career somewhere, you want to go get a cert because, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, that's just part of the process. That's how you get through the door. That's how you get the interview.
Yeah, no, it is. But luckily, if you think about it, a lot of these certs they're not like a PhD. So it is again through self-study, and that's something I must say. Why I love cybersecurity and why I've been in it for that long, because if you're curious and you like learning, that is the industry to go in, because it touches so many aspects and it's so exciting. I mean, you can if you think about social engineering and the sort of the human element and the psychological aspects, you can touch things like magic, and using the deception techniques and reading microfacial expressions, which is a completely different direction to, let's say, becoming like a cloud infrastructure security professional, which is also cool because that's where we need more people in, right? So I think it offers so many dimensions that if you slightly curious, which most humans are, we are animals with intelligence, that's curiosity. So it provides that playing field to really get into it and never stop learning. I mean, I like I said, I'm like a oldie in it, but I would definitely not call myself an expert because there's so much more to learn, and I will never get there because you can never touch everything. But it's nice to be able to learn new things every day.
Yeah, you cannot learn everything in cyber. And don't get into this career if you don't have a hunger to learn each and every single day.
That's it.
You have to have that hunger to read and learn and explore and try. And kind of wrapping up this interview, what are your kind of predictions for cybersecurity in Africa? Where do you see cyber really going over the next several years in Africa?
That's so. I think I have two views to that. The one would be sort of the standard canned, I don't know, prediction reports, but I have another story to that, which is, we can make a difference, and fortunately in South Africa and in Africa, I mean, I've started my business here, and I think it would have been much more difficult to do that in a more, let's call it, developed country like Germany, for example, with lots of bureaucracy and red tape, and also people that just maybe have a generally more resisting or skeptical mindset. Whereas here, people do want to make a difference, and you have the opportunity. And I mean, to give you an example, James, like I was in a it was like a virtual press roundtable discussion, and we had a bunch of IT service providers and like the people from the government and the journalists discussing the challenge that the African or South African government in that case has with becoming digitized. And people love to complain about the government not getting it right, but one of the things I said in that meeting is, well, you know what, we don't even have the skills. How can we expect the government to have the skills? So we have to work together, public, private sector, and solve the challenge together. And then that was just sort of, I threw that out because I think I probably read it somewhere else and wanted to sound clever. And then after that call, I had two of those bigger companies giving me a call or sending me a WhatsApp to say, hey, Anna, we want to be part of that. Let's do this. I'm like, well, I haven't really started anything, but why not? And now we've kicked off something called the Govx Innovation Challenge. I'll send you the link, which is sort of between the South African government, our universities, or we've got a thing called the Innovation Challenge, which is sort of sponsored by Samsung, and various security vendors, including Trend Micro, and then a couple of local vendors and KnowBe4. And we're sponsoring I don't want to call it a hackathon, it's more of a proper innovation challenge, because it goes beyond building an app. It's helping the government to build capacity in the incident response process, as well as helping prevent and assist victims of online gender-based violence. Those are the two challenges that we put out there for the students to find a solution. We've got nice sponsor money that sort of everybody was happy to jump on board. It was like, I don't know, when things just grow and have a momentum and it doesn't feel like work, it just kind of, it's happening. And I'm really excited about that. And initiatives like that are really easy to kick off in Africa or in South Africa, because people want to make a difference. They want to make an impact and help. And if we have more initiatives like that, then the forecast and the predictions will be much less dire than they may be on paper right now, right? So I'm hoping that by getting more people on board, by being able to hook into initiatives like that, working also with the African Union Cyber Security Expert Group to find ways that we can, as the African Union, to sort of collaborate more and standardize as a like an economic area, and have, like, for example, ratify the Malibu Convention, which is our data protection equivalent law. Then things will be much better than they currently are. So yeah, but in terms of the threats, I guess, as I mentioned before, mobility, cloud security is obviously an issue. Cloud credential hijacking is a big thing. The skill shortage, absolutely. We have to do more about that. Which also, by the way, that Govx Innovation Challenge, I'm not expecting the students to come up with the ultimate solution. That's not what this is about. It's more about really incentivizing the youngsters to be inspired to join the cybersecurity industry and get excited about it. And then there's a long-term effect. Maybe they come up with something really cool that we haven't thought about. Like, for example, hooking into South Africa's government to citizen communication channel, which is based on WhatsApp currently. And we already said, well, why don't we expand that with the sort of security volunteers, that when there's an incident, the CSIRT team can hook into that GovChat WhatsApp / tool, and then you get people to help the the victims when and if needed. I mean, this is just maybe something, to look at.
It's a great idea. I will say this: I'm proud of your Govx initiative. It is very American of you not to rely on the government and start to do something on your own. I think Americans predominantly are the kind of people who say, if you Ronald Reagan said this, the scariest words in English is, don't worry, the government will take care of it for you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, those are the scariest words in English. And I applaud your efforts to not wait for governments to do that. I do a live podcast every Thursday at 11 a.m. on LinkedIn with Naomi Buckwalter, a fellow CISO, and Renee Small. She's a super recruiter in InfoSec, and we do something called CISO Thursdays. And people get to ask us questions live. And one of the questions last week was, well, why don't states do more to get people in InfoSec? And I'm like, you want government to run something. The government can barely run itself.
Exactly.
Do not rely on government. Rely on you. There's an issue. We all see a problem. If anyone wants to address this challenge and is willing to put money, time, effort, whatever behind it, we can solve it ourselves. And that's what you've done successfully in Africa. And please do send me the link, folks. The link will be in the description of this podcast. You guys can get involved, sponsor, help. I know this goes beyond Africa because they do need the knowledge and the skill set of people from beyond that. And anything I can do to help, just call on me. I'll be the first to step up. Anything but relying on government to solve our problems is 2, 3, 10 thumbs up in my book. I can't recall one time a government actually solved a problem. I have yet. And see, you're thinking, your mind, Anna, went right to thinking, you're like, when has government ever solved a problem? Wait a minute. We're onto something here. Yes, businesses, entrepreneurship, free thinking, the private enterprise, capitalism, they solve problems because they have an incentive to do so. Government has very little incentive to solve problems. That's why problems continue to keep going on for generations and generations. When a government says we're here to fight poverty, I laugh. I literally laugh because I'm like, yeah, you guys have had your chance. Now it's time for the private sector to do that. And we see that in Africa, by the way. We see a lot of private entrepreneurs, a lot of companies coming in Africa and in other parts of the world and doing that. So obviously the whole idea of government doing something is a myth.
Oh yeah, no, they can't. They don't have the capacity. And thanks for saying that, James. I really appreciate that. And I think we would love to have you even if you just do a little intro or video, like because what we aiming to do is kicking it off with a sort of 1 week hardcore crash course in the cybersecurity aspects that are relevant to the challenge, and it will be recorded so the students can watch it when they have time. And I'm trying to recruit all the sort of experts that I know in the space, and if we have like some international speakers, it would be great to bring you on the program.
Let's send me all the information. I have a great group of people that I know will jump on this in a minute. Will do anything they can to help out. Great
awesome.
Names from all kinds of backgrounds, people that have, will really meet also your diversity goal, because that's part of it as well. We want
Brilliant.
Women on there.
Thank you.
We want men on there. We want different races, creeds, religions, colors, because cyber truly has no spectrum. Cyber is beyond
exactly.
all of that.
And the more diverse, the more innovation, the more the more solutions you will find, the more different backgrounds you bring to the table.
And the more inspiring
exactly.
it is. And I think there's an aspect to diversity that is beyond anything else, which is it gives you the ability to have someone who's very little, who may come from a different background that doesn't quite fit the mold of where they come from. And I remember speaking to Nikki Haley, the former secretary, the former UN ambassador to the of the U.S. and former governor of South Carolina. and hearing her story of how she grew up in a small town in South Carolina with her Indian immigrant parents. And she was literally the only Indian. They were the only Indian family in the whole town. But she didn't let that stop her. She let that lead her, and she eventually became the governor of South Carolina. And that's inspiring because I speak to a lot of people from different backgrounds, and I know a lot of folks who are of Southeast Asian descent who look at Nikki Haley here in the States and go, I can also be a governor. I can also be an ambassador. I can be more than just a doctor, an IT person, a small business owner or whatever. And we need that because Africa, people think of Africa as kind of just being one huge country. And I'm like, you have not met Africa, and you do not understand the diversity of Africa because, just Egypt and South Africa are two very, very, very different countries in one continent. Very different.
Oh yeah.
And so
and even, I mean, if you look at South Africa's being called the Rainbow Nation, and for good reasons, because we have so many different groups that I suppose, I mean, you also have that in the United States, where you have different representations from different backgrounds and religions. But it is really amazing to, for example, my first job here was in a company that was founded by Israelis or by South African Jews, and so a lot of the people were Jewish, and then I had a colleague who was Muslim, and I had the German background. So we would go out for beers. Obviously, the Muslim didn't drink alcohol, but it was like a joke. The German, the Muslim, and a Jew going into the bar. And it's so nice to. It's so much fun to be able to make friends and really get to know the authentic cultural backgrounds. So one of our, like a guy on my team, his name is Tabiso. He's a youngster. He's only like 23 or 24, and he's so amazingly like switched on, and like this new generation of, like, I don't know, they're not even, whether it's Gen Z, like the really young, guys.
Gen Z.
And he's
the
also
Gen Z, which is by the way, the most conservative generation since the baby boomers.
He is very conservative, funny enough, like if I compare myself to him at this age. But he's also a Sangoma, which in the Black culture is a witch doctor or a healer. So at his young age, he already is quite respected in the community, and he brings with him a lot of sort of wisdom. And but he's also like an amazing customer success manager in our world, so it's just so nice to meet these different cultures and be able to make friends with them.
Well, anything I can do, feel free to call on me anytime, point, period a day. Anything I can do to help your Govx kind of challenge take off, recruit people, bring on more people to help you create more content, more videos. I am at your service. I applaud that initiative. I'm glad we're able to talk about it and really bring it in. If you're listening, Anna's information is going to be in the description of this podcast. So you can reach out to me or directly go to her, and that's what I'd recommend. I don't want to be the middleman holding stuff up. If you want to get involved, if you want to help sponsor, pay for stuff, because I'm sure they're going to need more money, please reach out to Anna and help this Govx challenge. We are only as strong as our weakest link, and in a global economy, we got to be able to build up the countries that don't yet have that acumen and don't yet have that knowledge. And if we have it, shame on us for holding it back, and shame on us for not talking about it. That's the whole point of why I started this podcast. And I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're part of this goal. So please just take action now, and let's help Anna build this thing, and let's make it a huge international success where people look at it and go, let's replicate it. And let's show what exactly the kind of people that are in this community, because this community has the best people in the world. I have never met better people than the people I've met in cyber. I have lifelong friends from this industry that I didn't have from any other industry I've worked in. So
and yeah, sorry, James, to interrupt you there, but it's so true. And I haven't yet met a real cybersecurity person that is not passionate about it and doesn't want to give back and share their knowledge and volunteer to mentor, and that's exactly what we need, is sort of the older generation helping the youngsters to come in and.
Well, I think I learn more from youngsters sometimes than they learn from me. And I don't say that as a cliche, like I learned more from you than me, but the way they think, the way they operate is different from the way we were taught to do so.
True.
So it's great to see their brain work to solve problems. It's fascinating. Yeah. Their eyes light up. But we're out of time, folks. We're like way over time at this point. So, and then I could keep going forever, but I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show. Folks, all the information we spoke about, including all the links, are below in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to this week's Tech Corner. I know I haven't done these in like over a month, and Anna's just such a good guest. I want to keep going. And we could do this Joe Rogan style and go for like 3 hours. But then I'm sure Anna has stuff to do, and our time difference is it's almost dinner time in South Africa. So we'll let Anna go and have her supper. For all of you tuning in, folks, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Stay healthy, folks. Wear masks. Use social distancing. Take care of yourself and your family. Know your risk management. But really, most importantly, folks, it's fourth quarter. It's where cyber criminals try to take advantage of you over the holidays. So just be cyber safe. Practice your hygiene. And stay cyber safe, folks. That's it. Just signing off.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.